know what really makes us mad? Is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers, and welcome to Punk Lotto Pod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose one year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. And today we are talking about an album released in the year 1990, a year that I have spent a lot of time studying, and Dylan's birth year. So we'll get his thoughts on what his favorite record of 1990 as a literal infant. If you head to patreon.com/punklautopod, that's where you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio, where last week we did a 2-in-1 I'm Listening News of the World, where we talked about the news stories of the last 2 weeks, and the music we listened to over the last 2 weeks. So check that out there, and all the other weekly bonus audio and other goodies. I'm preparing the next installment of the 21st Century Breakdown, so that should be coming soon. We have our $5 tier, where that is our producer tier, so we shout out our producers every single episode, so shout out to our good buddy Steve Long, who got out of the hospital. He's doing much better than he was, still on the road to recovery, but we're very happy. We got to hear from him this week, so we're very happy to hear from him. And yeah, just keep on working at it, Steve. We're rooting for you. Also shout out to Dave Brown, my co-host on Bookenders, as well as the writer of the newsletter Oklahoma Lefty. He has got a lot of content out there right now. He has just been cranking out articles the last few weeks, so very cool stuff to see there. Shout out to our buddy Zach in Oregon, and shout out to Jason W., writer of the newsletter Songs About Chocolate and Girls. If you want your name said on the show every single week, sign up for that $5 tier. You also get to vote in a producer-exclusive poll, where you determine what we talk about on the Extra Play bonus audio. And we have the poll open now. We have a leader right now, but I'll leave it up a little longer. You also get access to written content, which by the time this goes up, there should be my top 5 favorite releases of April 2026 up there to read, as well as the month of April's show notes. So if you want to check into the notes, I have lots of links to interviews and articles in the show notes. So if you want to, read the articles and the source material that I'm going through, there's some really fun stuff on this episode, especially. But all of that's at the $5 tier. And then we have our $10 tier where you choose the album we devote an episode to. All right, all that's out of the way. 1990. Where Dylan was just a little baby.
For half the year.
Yeah. Didn't exist? Well, I guess you were a zygote for the first half of the year. An embryo.
I think you're more than a zygote at that point, but... yes. In my fetal state, I was listening to...
well, whatever our parents were listening to.
Yeah, I was listening to rock radio. Guns N' Roses.
Yeah, our parents' Adamant tapes and Led Zeppelin and a lot of fun stuff there.
So, 1990, something we've talked about before, where you've said this before, and I've kind of concurred, that your birth year you felt like was not a great year, and you've done some deep diving on that year. And I've deep dived on that year as well myself, and kind of found some true gems in that year. In 1990, there's certainly stuff that I love, but I was just looking at stuff that came out, and I was like, actually, I have like one 5-star album from 1990.
Wow. Will you be mentioning it?
I will. I'll mention it later, and I'll point it out. But yeah, I've always been kind of disappointed with 1990, with my birth year. I've always felt like it was kind of weird, and
it is a weird year.
Really didn't ever amaze me. And I've kind of dug into it over the years, and I've certainly come across, great records. And there's really important records that came out in 1990, many of which I will mention here. Mm-hmm. But yeah, overall, it's just kind of odd.
Yeah. What's funny is when I did a deep dive on 1990, I did it for an article for our old blog, where I listened to like 400 records that were released in 1990, including EPs. It wasn't just all LPs. And I loved it. I thought it was a great year. I thought there was so much good stuff in there. But I don't feel that way about 86 when I have dug into that one. And I wonder if it's something about it being your own year that makes you more disappointed in it.
Your standards are higher.
Yeah, you're like, oh, I wish my year had a lot more stuff I loved.
Yeah, that's I think is the thing that you're looking for is how is this year representative of me and my interests? And it's not that there's not stuff going on in 1990 that I'm into. There's a lot of stuff I'm really into going on in 1990, and it's just not a lot of it is my favorite version of any of that, or like maybe I really like certain genres, things that are happening, but it's just not as dense with like, all-time personal favorite kind of records. And so looking at it a little deeper, kind of breaking it down into subgenres and different kind of styles and trends and things that are going on. I've talked about this recently, I think actually more so on the extended play on the Patreon, but I was talking about how so much of what defines the 90s musically, especially in like punk and alternative, it really starts in the late 80s. And, that goes back to like, your alternative rock and post-hardcore and, even like emo, it really starts in the 80s, and shoegaze, all kinds of stuff like that really kind of starts to trickle in the late 80s and explodes a little bit more. And then, but there's also a lot of leftover stuff from the previous decade, stuff that started much earlier in the 80s, and maybe its heyday is past. So it's kind of funny to look at. It's kind of odd. You a lot of times don't think of these things coexisting quite as much as they do.
It is funny. 1990 is very much a transition year. And, it is. It's the beginning of a new decade. So, that's obvious. And you're going to have that leftover. Because a lot of times the decade really isn't defined by its music until, 2 years into it. That's 2 or 3 years in. That's when people tend to be like, this is 90s music. Because really, at the very beginning of the year, a lot of this stuff was written and recorded at the tail end of 89. So it is a lot of leftover 80s stuff. Looking at this list, there's a lot of, I'm not going to call them has-beens, but, bands that have been around and, are maybe on their way out. Or at least, it's an artist known for another band, and this is where they begin the next chapter in their career. So it's an interesting year. You don't get too much. There's not a ton of this where you're like, this is what the 90s will be like when I look at this list. But there's hints of it.
Yeah. I think, the biggest next thing, next big thing coming, pop punk, really.
Yeah.
Pop punk, as you know it in the 90s, is pretty much actually already on its way. It's pretty much fully formed. It's just not quite as popular yet, but the sounds are there. And so I'm kind of grouping in pop punk and skate punk and even emo. It is actually weirdly kind of a light year for emo, just because I think this is kind of one of the lowest points not lowest, but lightest points in the emo core arc, and we're not quite into the indie emo and Midwest. We're not at Sunny Day Real Estate yet. But Green Day put out 39 Smooth. Bad Religion put out Against the Grain. All put out Alroy Says. And then if you're getting into the emo world, Jawbreaker put out Unfun.
You said Alroy Says is the one, but you wrote Alroy Saves.
It's Alroy Saves.
It's the Jesus mock-up cover, right?
Yeah.
The all guy getting impaled, which is just I'm surprised that is not more offensive than it would come across. Probably because no one who would have cared probably saw it. So. It's funny, looking at that list, it's early Green Day. That might be the first Green Day LP, right? It's the first Jawbreaker LP. It's if it's not the first, it's just the second all LP, I think. There was the EP, LP thing.
Yeah, that is the first Green Day album. Alroy Says is the first. That's the third all record. It Says, Revenge, and Saves.
Yeah, Revenge one's an EP, I think, of those first two. But it's a 9-song EP or something like that. It's a weird one. So if you look at that, you got two young up and coming bands, Green Day, Jawbreaker, but you have two one legacy act. Bad Religion has already been a band for like nearly 10 years by this point. They've already done like weird waves. But funnily, even though Bad Religion formed in the 80s and released several records in the 80s, I still think of them more as a 90s band because I feel like that's where their impact is felt the most on what else is going on in punk at the time. So it's just kind of funny. And then they're about to go major in a couple years too. So that's notable. And then all being like, this is the band we're doing because Milo went to college and the Descendants had to break up. And so yeah, it's a little mix there. It's the old with the new on that one.
Some stuff that is certainly not new, and it is
all old.
it is just continuing to exist in very similar style, with maybe some slight exceptions. But Gothic rock, there's a lot of it in 1990, and there was a ton of it in the 80s, and it just keeps going as a genre. Now, obviously, Gothic rock, goths continue to exist, and what music they listen to kind of changes at a certain point, but
not that much. If you really think about modern goth music, and you're like, it's still trying to do 80s goth.
Well, so much of modern goth music like has just been trying to go back.
Mm-hmm.
I think when you get into the late 90s and into the 2000s, like, it diverges a lot more, and you get, I think goths are listening to more like metal than rock, and definitely industrial kind of takes over goth scenes, because goth as a subculture is primarily a club scene.
Yeah.
So the music just gets way dancier. But we've got records from Fields of the Nephilim, Sisters of Mercy. The Cure are going in more pop directions, but still have kind of their goth image at least. And I threw this one in here because it's not really actually that representative because we're already into his solo career, but Sam Hain's Final Descent came out in 1990. But Danzig 2 comes out in 90, I think. Yeah,
Final Descent was just like, we had these recordings and we wanted to put them out. The band was already been done for a few years already by that point. Yeah. Sam Hain was a weird one because it wasn't like a full...
They just became Danzig.
Yeah, they just turned into Danzig. It wasn't like Sam Hain broke up because like most of those guys were in like the final version of Sam Hain, the first Danzig lineup. But yeah, see, again, this is mostly the old guys. You know, like The Cure's been around forever. Sisters of Mercy, this is their last record, like the actual last studio album. Fields of the Nephilim, they've been around for a little bit. They feel, I guess, maybe the more modern out of this batch because they're doing a little bit more of a dark wave symphonic kind of thing. But yeah, Sam Hain is already a dead band by this point.
Something that I find interesting about 1990 is how extreme a lot of subcultures are getting and kind of how big they are. Noise rock certainly had existed in the 80s, but it really, I think, balloons into the 90s. In a lot of ways, it informs grunge, which is still not quite, has not blown up yet. But we've got Jesus Lizard Records. They put out Head, Cop Shoot Cop, Cows.
The kind of noise rock that I'm just like, I don't really want to listen to any of these.
Yeah. It's a lot of, gross and ugly, and I put this little category next to it, and I feel like they're kind of related, and it's very much the same drive of shock value, but I'm calling it mean punk. But Poison Idea put out Feel the Darkness, which is a killer record.
Big record too for them.
Yeah, it's definitely the biggest thing they did.
It's the touchstone record, right? Like that's the reference point when you say Poison Idea, Touch of Darkness. Yeah, Feel the Darkness, not Touch of Darkness. Just a touch of darkness.
Just the tip. Dwarves put out probably their most notable record, Blood, Guts, and Pussy.
Yuck.
It's the naked ladies covered in blood.
Yeah.
On the cover. Yeah.
It is the more famous cover. Yeah.
You've seen it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's funny you use the word mean punk to describe it because that is exactly what it is.
Yeah.
But it was also funny because I watched a movie that was released in 1971, and I was looking at like all the movies that came out that year, and I was looking at them, and I was like, 1971 is a year full of mean movies.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like, looking at it, it was like, oh, these movies are all about bad things happening to people. Like, Straw Dogs was a prominent movie that year, so that kind of gives you an idea. It's just funny, though we both had the mean as a descriptor this week.
Yeah, I think that's, I think that gets reflected too in like the extremity of like metal. Like 1990 is like a huge year for death metal. Like there's just so much death metal. It's really dark. It's really intense and violent, aesthetically, and metal in general is just going in that direction. We're a little early for black metal,
but it's starting to like percolate.
Yeah, we're getting there. We're tilting in that direction away from, not to say that like, hair metal was like nice. Those weren't nice people. Those were a lot of bad people, but the atmosphere is fun.
Partying. That's the vibe of hair metal.
Yeah. But yeah, metal is getting away from that. And thrash metal has been pushing it in that direction for years, certainly. And thrash metal is still showing up in punk. We've got lots of crossover. Most notable, I think, Suicidal Tendencies put out Lights, Camera, Revolution. And I put these two on here because I think it's funny that there's two joke crossover bands existing at the same time. But Gore put out Scumdogs of the Universe, and Lawnmower Death put out Ooh Crikey. It's Lawnmower Death. Why is that the genre? Because it's easy?
It's crossover, I feel like, is the genre that attracts people who want to play thrash, but they are not technically proficient enough to actually play full-on thrash. And maybe they want to have a little fun when they're doing it. I feel like crossover is probably more fun than thrash is at this point. Thrash feels a little more self-serious than crossover. But also, we're coming to the end of crossover. Crossover's almost over by this point. I never thought of Gore as a crossover band, but it kind of makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, they really are punks playing like a pretty watered down version of thrash metal.
Yeah. I think they turned into more just like a hard rock band later in the 90s, but I guess at this point there's more of a metal edge to them.
We've got some cowboy hat punk, and there's a lot of garagey stuff too as well. But, Social Distortion's self-titled record, huge. Uncle Tupelo's No Depression, which we've talked about before, huge. The Gun Club are still around. We've got kind of a late Cramps record, Stay Sick, middle period, I guess. They really did go into the, 2003 or something, so.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there's lots more garagey stuff, like Dead Moon and
all the Brits, too. There's a ton of British garage rock at this time. A lot of the Headcoats and all that kind of stuff.
And then, I guess, as we're going into a new decade, it's not really new. It's not new, but it is making the transition from what it used to be to what most people know it to be. And 1990, I didn't go looking too hard. It was really just the stuff that showed up on the punk charts on Rate Your Music. But Killing Joke, I think at this point, is pretty much just an industrial band. They put out Extremities, Dirt, and Various Repressed Emotions. And The Last Temptation of Reed by Lard came out that year. So
that's Jello and Jello Biafra and the Ministry guys, right?
And Ministry probably has...
Yeah, there's probably...
No, it was 89. Mine Is a Terrible Thing to Taste was 89. So it's an in-between year, because he was doing Lard, I guess.
Nine Inch Nails is happening around this point, too. I don't know if they have a record that year, but it is, around the period of the first couple of Nine Inch Nails records.
Pretty Hate Machine was 89.
Yeah. I think that's the first LP. But.
Yeah, so we're a few years out from them really blowing up. And this weird shit going on in the UK. Not even to mention the shoegaze stuff, because there's Ride has an LP, and I'm sure there's more. There's probably a Lush record. I can't remember. I didn't actually put all the shoegaze stuff down because I just thought it was more interesting to talk about the baggy stuff.
Yeah,
and the grebo and the alternative dance. How are these different genres of music? I mean, alternative dance I understand, because that you could take back to the 80s. You could go New Order. You could go Depeche Mode and call that alternative dance.
I mean, even like the Cure remix stuff during this time period, you would call, alternative dance too.
The Fall are doing dance music in 1990. They put an Extricate. We've got Chumbawamba Slap, which I actually almost briefly considered. But I think I want to do the one with Tub Thumping.
I was going to say, like, do you do the biggest record, or do you do a record that's probably more actually representative of what they were?
Yeah.
I don't know. It's tough. I don't know.
Slap is not quite there yet. I think Tub Thumping would be the one to do on this show. And we've got stuff from The Charlatans, Carter the Unstoppable Sex Machine. The record's called 101 Damnations.
That's good.
Happy Mondays, put out Pills and Thrills and Bellyaches.
There's definitely a song on there too.
Let's see.
Happy Mondays isn't one I know by name.
Well, it's Bez.
I mean, I don't know the song titles by name, like the songs that I would know by them.
Yeah, I don't know what's on that record. There was a hit.
There is a hit on that record. I don't know what it's called.
Step On was the first single.
Could be.
Bob's Your Uncle? I don't know.
I don't think it's that one. I feel like I would remember that one. It's a very British phrase. Bob's your uncle. What does that mean? What does that mean? I've always heard it, and I never know what it even means.
There you have it. Simple as that.
Bob's your uncle. Yeah, I mean, I guess the idea is everybody has an Uncle Bob. It's the idea of that comment. But
the theory is that it goes back to 1887 when British Prime Minister Robert Bob Cecil appointed his nephew to a high-ranking government position. So, Bob's your uncle. That's how you got the job.
Oh, okay. And boom, Bob's your uncle. Yeah. I see it. Yeah. Well, okay. So, very interesting time period, transitionary period, coming out of the 80s, going into the 90s. What did you almost pick for us to talk about? It's weird. I'll say this.
Yeah. I was in a weird mood looking at it. And the records that stood out to me, I guess, were just less obvious, is what I was going for, is what I was looking for to talk about. Because a lot of the stuff from 1990 that maybe would make more sense, I feel like we've talked about a lot. So, yeah, I just wanted to get a little further out. This is kind of an ongoing attempt at trying to nominate and listen to more records that I'm less familiar with on this show, especially records I've never even heard. So most of the records that I considered, I had never heard before. I considered Red Cross's Third Eye because I'm very curious about this band. I don't know which one is the most important to do. I think this one's pretty popular in their discography, though.
Yeah, I don't know what Red Cross's deal is. I know they start as a punk band, like a hardcore punk band, but like I don't even think they're that hard. I think they're kind of like maybe like Youth Brigade hard, which isn't that hard, but I could be way off on that too. But then they evolved into like whatever this is. They're like kind of an alternative rock band, but also kind of psychedelic too. There's like a 70s vibe to like how they dress.
Yeah, they started out as this kind of like glam rock punk thing, kind of New York Dolls-ish, I guess.
Yeah.
I think they're just generally categorized as a power pop band. But I had never really heard them until this week, and I did listen to a little bit of one of their 80s records. And that record, I can see a lot more of the glam rock stuff there. But I think what is kind of interesting about Red Cross as a band, I think they're pretty instrumental in the sort of generational handoff of the power pop label. I think it's really during their career that you see this transition from power pop being a term that's being used in the 70s for bands that are trying to sound like the Beatles and, trying to sound like 60s rock bands. And towards getting into the 90s, it's a lot of the bands that were trying to do that Beatles thing in forming like the next generation. And it kind of turns into much more of a late 70s, sort of Cheap Trick, sort of new wave adjacent sound. And it's the 60s elements are stripped away a lot more. And I think Red Cross kind of like straddles that line. But decided not to pull the trigger on that one. I don't know. I considered Scattered Fuse Sin Disease.
Does anyone listening know what this is? Because, one, it is very important, but for one particular scene. But
yeah. This is the one to do by them. This is probably the one I was closest to considering, other than the one I picked. But even though this is the one to do, I don't know if we actually really need to do a Scattered Few record.
They're worth discussing from their importance on Christian punk.
Yeah.
And you're right. Do we need to do that? I don't know. It's for consideration, definitely.
Yeah.
I think what makes this record so special, though, is that this might be one of the first Christian punk albums that actually feels boundary pushing and modern. Whereas so much of the other like 80s Christian punk stuff is very reactionary and just kind of like, oh, a version of something that exists. Even the Crucified, who are considered like legends, are doing crossover. After crossover had already been a thing for a couple years.
Yeah.
And even like with Michael Knott's LSU stuff, he's going into like goth rock directions in the 80s. So even that's, well-trod territory. This record, one, it's still fucking weird. If you listen to it today, you're like, God, this record is weird. And
yeah, Scattered Few being as genuinely boundary pushing, like you said. Mm-hmm. Weirdly coming from like Daniel Amos connections and like Gene Eugene production, weird band. Mm-hmm. This record struck me as maybe more of a conversation piece than as something I would actually enjoy. So that's probably why I didn't pick it, especially because we just did that fall record.
It's one of those records that if we put it in front of the Christian punks, they'd be all over the episode, and our numbers would probably be really great for it, because Christian punks will go to reviews of Christian punk records, even if it's one that's been covered to death like this record has. So we would have got a good bump on it, numbers-wise. I don't know if they would have been people who stuck around, though, but you never know with that kind of thing. Weird band. Famously, the lead singer of this band and his family were featured on an episode of Wife Swap, an episode of the show that I watched, of a show I never watched, and I didn't know he was going to be on it. And it wasn't until I was like halfway through the episode that I learned who it was, and it was just weird. I'd never watched that show before or after, but I guess something about a dreadlocked guy and kids who were like clearly into punk caught my eye enough that I was like, I gotta watch this episode and see what it is. And then I later found out it's lead singer of Scattered Few. Weird.
And I also considered Doughboy's Happy Accidents. I keep looking at Doughboy's records. I don't know why I don't really know this band beyond name recognition. I don't know which one to do.
Might be this one. Whichever one. It might be. I gotta look at the covers, because their covers are all very similar color palettes on all their album covers. Is this the one? Is this the one with like the shattered glass cover?
It's the compass.
Yeah, I don't know if this is the one. There's one. I think it's the one before that is like, that's the one I think we should do, but because I think this is. Nope, that's the next one. It came out in 93. Crush is the one to do, not in the 93 record. Because it's got Shine. That's their like big song. It came out on a major. It was on A&M. This would be... I don't think there's a bad Doughboys record. But... Because there's only like 3 or 4. There's not that many anyway. But... Yeah. You've never listened to any Doughboys, right?
No. I think I vaguely know what they sound like, but I've never listened to a record.
That's funny. We should do one. Just for you to listen to one. Because they're good. They're really good. They are a really good band. It's super influential on Sam I Am's sound. Yeah. All right. So, your year was the year 1990. What did you choose from that year for us to talk about?
So, the record I settled on was The Earth is Flat by Supertouch.
I've been thinking something's just not right. Thoughts focus in and fade out. When then it seems, well, that this engine is running out of steam.
And I have a few stats on the band. So Supertouch, we're from Brooklyn, New York. They formed in 1987, and their style of music is, I think most people consider just post-hardcore, but there are elements of just straight-ahead hardcore and emo as well. This is their lone full-length album, and it was released on Revelation Records. I couldn't find a month or date when it was released. The person on this record is Joe Graziano on bass, Andy Guida on drums, John Biviano on guitar, and Mark Ryan on vocals. A lot of Italian-sounding names there. Some additional musicians on here. We have backing vocals by Bill Dolan of the band American Standard, as well as the band themselves. And it was produced by Jamie Locke, as well as the band. So what made you choose the Supertouch for us to discuss?
So, like I said, I was in a weird mood, and I didn't want to retread stuff that was familiar. Of all of the records that I considered, this was the one I was most familiar with. But I can't recall if I've ever actually listened to the whole album. I think in the past I've probably tried listening to it. I put it on and I wasn't in the mood for it. But I don't have like a firm memory of ever listening to this album from beginning to end. It's definitely one that I loosely knew what it sounded like. I don't think I had all of the particulars kind of nailed down in my head. So, but I knew where it came from, and I knew kind of not the story of it, but like some details surrounding it and a little bit of what its legacy is. So that was probably what pushed me to really pick it for this record. It's like, okay, let me actually solidify what this record is in my head. I want to know the story. I want to know why this one LP by this band is something that still gets kind of talked about and mentioned today. And I think it's just really fascinating that these kind of hardcore guys made this kind of hardcore record. And I figured maybe similar to that Scattered Few record, I would get something out of it, even if I didn't end up liking the record. I did think there was a better chance I would like this record, though. But yeah, I mean, that's my kind of my history and reasoning for picking this record. I have questions that need to be answered about this record.
Explain to me this. Yeah. I listened to this record back when I did that article where I was listening to a bunch of stuff from 1990. And I remember thinking at the time, like, okay, this is kind of a big deal record. And I listened to it, and I remember not particularly caring for it. Like, I didn't think it was bad, but I was just like, yeah, it didn't really do a lot for me. I have a theory on why that is, and we can get into that a little bit later, but I have spent some time with this record, so it wasn't, left field choice for me. It's a record that when you had it in that batch of records, I was like, that's probably the most important record we should do out of the 4 you nominated. And it's their only LP, so it also makes it, we're going to get to this record eventually, because it's just such a big deal. It's the only thing they did. This is the year it came out, So, yeah, I spent some time with it. They weren't really one of my bands. I listened to it, but I was never, like, super duper into it. Maybe we can get into that later. Why exactly? But sonically, they're weird. There's a lot going on here, too. We'll get more into, like, specifics, but when thinking about the kind of music that it is definitely post-hardcore, because it's not playing hardcore in the most straight-ahead way, and I kind of think this might be one of the first post-hardcore records that you would say, oh, that's capital P post-hardcore. Like, that is, oh yeah, this is a genre now.
Sort of. And so that's kind of the direction I went with my also-rans, because I was like, what can I actually categorize with this record? And I see what you mean.
Maybe I mean it for a certain kind of hardcore fan. Maybe that's what I'm thinking.
Yeah.
Because there was things called post-hardcore in the 80s. All of the Rev Summer, late 80s Discord is kind of considered post-hardcore. I think Swizz is considered post-hardcore, you know.
I think even you could, you know, people have made the case, and maybe it's really where the term originates with like bands like Mission of Burma and Husker Du and Minutemen.
Yeah.
You know, being that they're taking hardcore or coming from hardcore and like breaking conventions within that genre and kind of trying to explore logical extremes. It's kind of what I think of post genres as being. And I think that I would say this record is a capital letters post-hardcore record in how it sits between where the term originates and where it goes. And it's very much this almost exact middle point. Because, like I said, it's these kind of hardcore guys making this kind of hardcore record. Like, what interested me about it, like, these guys aren't part of a post-hardcore scene.
Right.
And in 1990, those exist.
They do.
Like, post-hardcore as being spatially locked.
Geo-locked, geocached.
Yeah. You know, geographically centered in a couple of specific cities.
Yeah.
In 1990, like, that's happening. And where they come from, it's sort of happening.
There's one big notable one we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah.
Very big contemporary that I read some funny stuff about, too. So.
Yeah. Yeah. But post-hardcore, as maybe you think of it more classically in 1990, is going to be Fugazi. It's going to be...
Yeah, it's Fugazi.
Fugazi's Repeater. That's the benchmark for everything. For post-hardcore as a genre, as a clearly defined genre, now developing really its own musical conventions instead of trying to bend and break hardcore. They've bent it and broke it enough that it's something else now. And Fugazi is that template. And everybody in DC just copies them.
It's fitting that it's like the first LP, the first full-length Fugazi record is in 1990 as well. I think that's another...
Yeah.
Fugazi spins out of that DC post-hardcore scene. And what I was trying to get at with Supertouch being like the first big capital letters post-hardcore record, I feel like it's going forward. It is more influential going forward than what has already kind of happened. Because Fugazi's already painted, you know, have some influence during this time period. But keep going with the...
Two very important EPs already at this point.
Yeah.
Played a lot of shows already. And, you know, so in that DC scene, we've got stuff like Shudder to Think. They put out 10 Spot, which kind of gets at a different side of this Supertouch record.
Yeah, there's some similarities there that I picked up on listening to the record. And I was like, oh, I hear some Shudder to Think in some ways.
Not DC, but definitely part of this new style of post-hardcore and some on the West Coast. Pitchfork put out Eucalyptus. Pitchfork is future Drive Like Jehu, Rocket from the Crypt, Hot Snakes. It's Rick and John Reese, their first band together. And that's a whole scene that is kind of has its own sound. San Diego.
Mm-hmm.
A little bit more emo core and into screamo is really where San Diego's more important. But the Rick Froberg, John Reese influence does ring out for a long time in that city, in that scene. Further up the coast, Fuel put out their self-titled record.
Jokingly referred to as Fugazi at the time because of their similarities to Fugazi. But I always took some umbrage with that because I'm like, they're way faster. And I feel like in some ways they were harder than Fugazi was.
They were more consistently trying to be a hardcore band. They just had a little bit of a groove to them.
Yeah. They did the thing, the guitar, the triplet guitar that's like super famous for Fugazi and the emo core scene.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, emo core, you know, that plays into the Bay Area a lot. You know, Sam I Am, Jawbreaker. Mm-hmm. That's my 1 5-star record from 1990.
That's your only one? You don't consider Repeater a 5-star?
Not really. It just doesn't have quite the personal impact for me. It's very, very close.
I mean, I guess out of this list, if I couldn't give something else if something else was going to get 5 stars, it'd be Repeater for me. But everything else, the Fuel record is... I mean, the Fuel record's my favorite record of 1990.
Yeah.
By a long shot.
And there's that Ride record, Nowhere, from 1990. That's very close. Bob Mould's Black Sheets of Rain is...
Phenomenal record, yeah.
Great record, but it's not quite a 5-star record for me. But yeah, the Fuel record is the one that I'm like, okay, that feels very, very personal to me in the way that most other records from 1990 don't. We've got other kind of weird things happening in punk that I think there are some stripes of in this Supertouch record. Supertouch, I think, because of the post-hardcore thing and the little bit of that kind of emo-core thing, while I don't think these bands actually sound the same, there's enough lineage and like background influence and just different directions that you can go from where they start. But Bitch Magnet put out Ben-Hur, Chapel Hill band, but also with Louisville scene connections. So think math rock, Slint, Rodan, that kind of stuff. Maybe cousins with this Supertouch record.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying. Yeah, they come to it differently, but I would still say that what Bitch Magnet and even all those other math rock bands you mentioned, that is a genre of post-hardcore. So it is cousins. Yeah, I could see that.
Also from Louisville. Also kind of weird.
Weird band.
Just an odd interpretation of hardcore. Endpoint put out In a Time of Hate.
I tell you how weird Endpoint is. They're sometimes tagged metalcore. And it's just like, huh? I mean, in the early days when they're not, there's no like one sound of metalcore yet. I guess that's why. There's some metal riffs. I think that's why people kind of say it could be metalcore. I don't consider them truly a metalcore band, but yeah.
And the rubbery bass thing.
Yeah. Good band, though. I do like them. I always say, I think it comes across like I don't like Endpoint. I do like Endpoint. I've listened to several of their albums, and I enjoy everything that I listen to from them.
I don't think I like Endpoint.
I like them. I think I like them because they're weird. There is something about that.
Endpoint.
I think the album Catharsis, and then I think it's the one right after that, maybe, that I think is pretty good. They just reissued it last year. Or this year, actually.
Swizz, you mentioned them earlier. They put out Hell Yes, I Cheated.
Are they still in DC at the time? Swizz is always in DC, weren't they?
Yeah.
It's just that Sean moved to New York, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
They broke up in 90. I think basically they broke up probably concurrent to this record coming out. I don't have the details of their story memorized, but
yeah.
The last thing from Swizz, Jason moves to New York.
There's like a posthumous 7-inch, I think, that came out too after this, but yeah, they were done. They were done by several years by the time that came out. These next four are...
Actually, did Jason move to New York?
Jason? I know Sean moved to New York. Or did
Sean move to New York?
Sean moved to New York because he's like a tattoo artist, right? Up there.
No, he's in Maryland now.
Am I just smashing Civ and Sean Brown together because they're both tattoo artists? That might be what I'm doing.
Retasonic was in New York. Jason does move to New York.
So Jason moves. Okay, not Sean. Okay. It's funny because like I think of that band as, and all the other like sequel bands that basically consisted of Jason and Sean working together.
Yeah.
And most of those other guys too. It was really a lot of the same guys, but
Jason doesn't move to New York until the 2000s because Blue Tip was in DC.
Okay. Yeah.
Retasonic was the one that was in New York though. That's why Retasonic exists, and there's not Blue Tip. It's not just more Blue Tip records.
Even though it sounds like more Blue Tip.
Yeah.
These next four, weird. I get why you've highlighted them, though.
Yeah. So, these records are metal records.
Mm-hmm.
I think that these are records that would inform a lot of hardcore records in the mold of this Supertouch record after the fact. Probably the closest musically we get from this list Neurosis' word is law. Neurosis is on their way out of being a crust punk band into being a post-metal band on this record.
Yeah, this is the first record with Steve Von Till on it. I mean, they only had the one LP before, but yeah, they're a Berkeley band, so there's that little connection there to like Fuel and Green Day and stuff like that. To me, it's very funny to think of like Neurosis is also came out of the same scene and club that Green Day did. It's just very funny to me.
And then in 1990, groove metal as a genre pretty much is fully formed. 3 really important records in that genre. Pantera's Cowboys from Hell. How many hardcore kids would play Pantera riffs?
Oh, yeah.
Going forward.
What's funny about Pantera is, though, they come from just metal, though. Like, they were a hair metal band. Yeah. So it's funny to me that it's... I mean, I know... I'm pretty sure, like, Phil Anselmo was really tapped into punk rock. I think Phil was the guy who was into punk music in the band. I think the other guys were just more like, we do metal.
Yeah. Yeah, Phil was definitely the one that was listening to punk records and listening to, like, doom bands and...
Yeah.
Would be into sludge and... Yeah. He's definitely the one that pulled that band in a new direction and saved them from obscurity. Made them one of the most influential metal bands of all time.
Yeah.
Can't listen to them. God, they fucking suck.
God, they suck. There's some good riffs. That's really it. Like, there's a handful of riffs. Walk rocks. That's a great song. It's a great song.
But, I mean, that one Pantera riff, I mean, it's like... I don't know, it's WWE music.
Yeah, it's Rob Van Dam's entrance theme. And it was literally his theme in ECW. And then when he went to the WWE, they had to like make up a song. And so they gave him like a non-point song or something like that. But it's like, yeah, non-point, listen to Pantera. Yeah. By the way, I do love Rob Van Dam's WWE theme. Yeah. One of a kind. It's a fun song.
Some good records. Helmet, Strap It On. Kind of coming from the
same scene, New York.
Same scene,
similar scene. Supertouch were so entrenched in the hardcore scene and Helmet wasn't. It's just they're both New York bands and playing CBGBs. Like that's the main connection.
Helmet's playing with like noise rock bands. You know?
Yeah,
and also a New York band. Prongs beg to differ.
It is funny. Okay, you got Helmet and Prong on like one side of the New York groove spectrum. You got Supertouch. And a band I'm going to mention here in a minute that starts with a Q on the hardcore side. The hardcore side of groovy post-hardcore. So they are two sides of the same coin to me.
Everybody in New York, for some reason, was just like, let's make music that you lift weights to.
I feel like that is like most of New York's music outpouring from like the mid-'80s on. Because like... all of that Cro-Mags, Agnostic Front stuff, yeah, it's weightlifting music. Like, even the thrash stuff that comes from New York, you're still just like, I'm getting pumped. This is my cardio song. Yeah. Some other 1990. So, Revelation Records 1990, which is where this record was released Shelter's Perfection of Desire. I believe that might be the first Shelter LP. There are no more LPs from Revelation in 1990, though, and the other EPs that came out were the Youth of Today self-titled, so I think that's another case of some old material getting the light of day finally, because Ray and Porcel are already doing Shelter. We have the Q band I previously mentioned. Quicksand's self-titled 7-inch was released in 1990, and I would say Quicksand's probably more important for what post-hardcore becomes in the 90s, but Supertouch beats them to the punch to the LP. And
I think that's very interesting. Like, Supertouch does this record, and then along comes Little Quicksand.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody acts like they invented it.
Yeah. It's like, it was already there. It was already in the same exact scene. This was the same scene.
Yeah. Same guy, same guys almost.
Same label, same... There is a direct connection I'll mention too, as well. Yeah. Yeah.
Let's do a rock version of hardcore.
Yeah. It really is what that is. Also in 1990 on Revelation, The Burn self-titled 7-inch. And yes, we mentioned them last week, but Inside Out, No Spiritual Surrender, the Zach De La Roca hardcore band. This was, I think it's like the only real major release they put out. I think there's some other things, but this EP is the EP to listen to if you want to hear what Zach was doing in 1990 before Rage Against the Machine happens. Because I don't know Zach's story. I didn't know I do my research on that. I don't know. Does Rage start in New York as a band? I don't remember. I just think of them as a California band, but I think that's just because of, what's his name?
They definitely formed in L.A.
Okay, so that means Zach just moved. Yeah, okay. And then produced by Jamie Locke in 1990. Very notable, and probably why there are some similarities there. Beg to Differ by Prong, produced by Jamie Locke, as well as the Supertouch record. So The Groove has actually passed. We have been a mediator. We have Jamie Locke to be our mediation between them. We have Scatterbrains, Here Comes Trouble, which is the post-Ludachrist band. Kind of jokey, tongue-in-cheek. Dave did a piece on it. I listened to the record. Had a good time talking about it.
I have to correct you, because I was like, I don't think he ever was in New York. Inside Out. And they were an Orange County band.
That is weird, because Revelation is very New York.
Yeah, I don't know why they got on there. But, yeah, they were in Orange County.
Because pretty much every single other record that came out in 1990 was a band from New York. So that's funny. Okay. We also have Rest in Pieces, their record, Under My Skin. This band features members of Sick of It All, Helmet, and Biosphere. So, some more New York hardcore Helmet connections there, too. We have some Bullet La Volta, which is like Chavez and Moving Targets members. Chavez is the later band. Moving Targets was the older band. So, very funny. And then something from Shockmaster Laz, which was like an electro record. That is the funny thing about looking at producers from this time period, because it's like a lot of times they don't just do one kind of thing. So having that in there, and then something from a band called Die Theory. I don't know anything about them. Interesting year. This also ran section. Is very interesting.
This is my life, but I just can't seem to get it right. I dream, found no, it's just no use. The longer I think, the more I'm confused.
All right, let's do the story. So, prior to Supertouch, vocalist Mark Ryan played in the New York hardcore band Death Before Dishonor. No, it's not that Death Before Dishonor. That's a Boston band that is actually still active, I believe, today. If they're not active, it's been within the last 10 years. They're still active. But I've seen Death Before Dishonor live at Breastfest, I think.
That's unfortunate.
Yeah, was not impressed. But completely different band. This is a pre-Judge hardcore band. This band featured Mike Judge, who is not the King of the Hill co-creator.
Yeah. I wished that it was.
I think Ferraro or something like that is his real last name, but they just call him Mike Judge. That's my favorite thing, is when a guy in a band has the name of the band as his name. And he usually is like Mikey Erg, Mikey Dumps, like, even though, Mike Bruno hasn't been down in the dumps for almost like 15, 20 years, people still think of him as Mikey Dumps. Yeah, Mike Judge.
Lauren Measure.
Lauren Measure, yeah, right. Yeah. I love that kind of thing. But this is proto Judge with Mark Ryan on vocals. So all three of them, they go on to form Judge, seminal band. They already have their first record by this point. Like, they are already an established thing in New York hardcore. And so immediately following the exit of most of those guys, but most notably Stephen Yu, Mark brought in his high school classmate John Biviano to play guitar. Now, Death Before Dishonor was basically done at this point by the time by the time John came in, but they kind of just kept the name just to be like, we don't have anything to call it yet. So they were just calling it Death Before Dishonor while they were putting the pieces together to form a new band. They do eventually land on the name Supertouch, which they take from the Bad Brains song of the same name. And I did read an interesting interview with the members of the band talking about Bad Brains, because the interviewer seemed like kind of like a dickhead, because he was like, so you're named after a Bad Brains song. Do you agree with their stance on homophobia, on gay people? It's like, what? Why would you ask that? One, that's extremely like rude and presumptive to just be like, you named yourself after Bad Brains, you must hate gay people. It's like, what? And they were just like, of course we don't. Like, and their big thing was like, look, we loved their music. Their music was super influential to us. Like that's why we call ourselves Supertouch. We love them. And, they were in New York at the time, so they got to see them. But Bad Brains is also kind of broken up at this point, and this is before, they reunite. And they talk about how it's like, yeah, the anti-gay stuff, it's like Bad Brain, it was HR just basically like hiding behind religion to be homophobic was kind of the idea. And it's just funny to think about. They were talking about this like right after it basically happened. Like this was still new. And so it was like Bad Brains had some stink on them at this time from more left-leaning people. And one thing though, they did point out, they were like, I guess the only main difference between what Bad Brains were doing is, yeah, they were claiming, Rastafarianism as their religion, but they didn't preach Rastafarianism to the degree that all these hardcore kids were converting to it. Unlike what Ray Capo was doing with Krishna, and then just now it's hip to be Krishna in New York. And so it was just like a funny, like, two ways of doing it, but I thought that was interesting. So they would eventually bring in Carl Serio to play bass, replacing Jimmy Yu, and they contribute a song to two different comps, both by Revelation Records. The New York City Hardcore 1987 comp Together, which is a 7-inch, and the New York City The Way It Is, released in 1988. They contributed the same song to both. Searching for Light, I think is what it's called. But completely different recordings with different lineups. So it's just kind of funny that 2 volumes of the series have the same song performed twice. So Mike Judge eventually leaves the band. He is replaced by drummer Frank Basile, but then he will be replaced not too long after by Andy Guida from the bands Altercation and Stillborn. He becomes their new drummer. Carl Serio would leave Supertouch and be replaced by bassist Mike Bitton, who wouldn't stay very long, who would then be replaced by Joe Graziano. The band claims there were way more bassists in the band. I think they just didn't record. So, one, Eddie Cohen, aka Eddie Leeway of the band Leeway, and Tom Capone of the band Quicksand, and Walter Schreifels played bass in Supertouch. Not on any records, probably just live, and that's about it. But I do think it's very interesting that Walter plays in Supertouch and then turns around and starts Quicksand, also with Tom Capone. So it's like 2 guys who played bass in Supertouch wind up forming Quicksand. So it's kind of like, I don't think Quicksand was doing a direct ripoff of what Supertouch was doing, but I do think it's very interesting that they're doing the same thing, especially considering I read a very funny interview where the members of Supertouch were talking shit on Youth Crew and how much they hated the guys in Youth Crew because they were all the slap the beer out of your hands, think down on you because you have a drink or smoke a cigarette kind of people. They were like, fuck you, buddy. Like they didn't like the attitude of the Youth Crew guys. And to me, it's very funny that Walter Schreifels is in this band. Also, I don't think Walter Schreifels is a straight edge. I think he's like a big pothead now. So it's like, and I don't know if this is true. This is just something I feel like I read. But so if you listen to the late Quicksand, or not even Quicksand, but like later Walter Schreifels bands, you're like, yeah, he found weed. But yeah, I don't know. I thought it was funny that they were just like, fuck Youth Crew. They didn't really have too much of a problem with the other hardcore. It was mainly Youth Crew bands. So Supertouch releases their first 7-inch, What Did We Learn, in 1989. That comes out on Combined Effort Records, which at the time was known for being a vegan record label. mainly like the type of bands who would sign to that label were vegan or vegetarian bands. And Supertouch consisted of 3 out of the 4 members were vegetarian or vegan. Mark was vegan. The other 2 were vegetarian. I thought it's interesting that they were on that label, but they're not really thought of as like a vegan label or a vegan band either. It was funny because the one interview I read was talking about how they had issues with the mix and the cut of the test press for the 7-inch, that it got delayed by a lot, and they were recording the LP at the same time. So like they were waiting for the 7-inch to be pressed while they're recording the record for Revelation. And it's just kind of interesting to see the timing on that. But Revelation is where this record is released. It's a legendary hardcore label. It's founded in 1987 by Jordan Cooper and Ray Capo. Never knew which way to say that. And by this time, Revelation had already released music by The Gorilla Biscuits, Bold, Judge, Chain of Strings, Warzone, Sick of It All. And people were very, very like, oh, Supertouch is a straight edge band, because Revelation had a reputation of being a straight edge record label. And every band on Revelation was not straight edge, but that was just kind of like what people thought of it as at the time. And they were like, yeah, we're not straight edge. We all like to drink. They're just like, yeah, anything in moderation. That's all it is. You know, they're not super drunk guys, but they're, you know, they drink. So they're already weirdos within this hardcore scene. They are very, very, very tied into a scene that features Youth Crew, straight edge, and other hardcore bands, but they're kind of not any of those things. And it's weird. They're just weird.
Yeah. Yeah, we don't like Youth Crew. We're not straight edge. We are like, you know, like, we're not fully vegetarian vegan band, and it's not part of our identity.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. Everyone was so declarative in New York hardcore. It's like, this is the line. This is what we are. And Supertouch are just kind of like, I don't know. It's just a hardcore record. I don't know.
Yeah. They're a group of outsiders.
Krishna. We're not, you know.
We're not Krishna. We're, you know, talking shit on Bad Brains stances, even though we named ourselves out them. We have problems with a lot of people in the scene. That feels like New York hardcore in general, though. There's a lot of beef happening in New York hardcore. Somebody's got a problem with somebody in every band and scene. It's a tough time, too, in New York. Like, this is still not cleaned up New York yet. It's still pretty rough around the edges still by, you know, it's starting to improve by 90. You know, we're beginning to clean it up a little, but it's still kind of rough, especially in these parts where, you know, they're playing shows. It's still rough areas, so. This was recorded at Normandy Sound in Warren, Rhode Island by producer and engineer Jamie Locke, and Locke had previously recorded with Gangrene, Leeway, Cro-Mags, Judge, and a record we talked about not that long ago, Sick of It All's Blood, Sweat, No Tears, and was assistant engineered by Derek Carden. I think it's funny that we have done 2 New York hardcore records this year already, and it's only April, so a thing that we're like, we don't like this. But here we are. The record was released on vinyl, CD, and cassette. And the band had a very free form of writing. Their ideas, they basically said that anyone who had an idea, they could bring it to, you know, to the band, and they would all work on it together. It's very collaborative, very, anyone could bring something. There was no one songwriter to the band. Mark did write all the lyrics, though. He was the singer, makes sense. Usually you just let the singer write their own lyrics. So they also at the time would open their sets by just improving an opening for a couple minutes, they would improv their first few minutes of their set, just jamming, which is weird, too, for a hardcore band to do. But I can hear it when I listen to this record. Like, what I hear on this album is I hear the results of jamming. They got to this record and the songs on this record. So it's kind of a neat idea. I wonder if there were ever any times where they jammed on something on stage and they were like, we need to remember that and try it out later. Could be worth thinking about, but... And then, yeah, they were interesting in the sense that they were from New York. They were in the New York hardcore scene. They were very much playing shows with tons of New York hardcore bands. But they were influenced by DC, primarily. They were super into Discord records and way into that sound in general. They were more influenced... They cited influences as Marginal Man, Scream, and Minor Threat. And they're like, and later Fugazi. So, all of them, super into The Who. For some reason, that was their childhood band. I think that's funny. I don't hear a lot of Who here, but apparently they all loved The Who. Very weird. So, I think this is the magic formula. You take a bunch of New York hardcore guys, and then tell them to try and make a DC Discord record style post-hardcore album. And I think that's how you get here. Throw in the fact that you have two, like, borderline virtuoso players in your band. Your guitarist and your bassist are both, like, really talented performers. Yeah, you kind of just wind up with a weird band that doesn't really fit with this particular scene, but were embraced and beloved by this scene, which is important. Strange history. And I got some more stuff we could talk about later, but like the artwork and stuff. But yeah, we'll pause for there. All right, now here it is. We're an hour into the recording. We're finally going to get to our opinions. What did you think of this record? Because this was new to you.
Sort of. Like I mean, I kind of roughly knew what it sounded like. So I think in my head, in my memory from where I maybe tried to listen to this record in the past and either just didn't finish it or it didn't stick with me, I think I thought of this band as being more musically out there than they are. I think they're still a weird band. I think they're an odd mix of elements, but it's not quite as out there as I thought. It wasn't like Iceburn or anything. But that's kind of where I had them categorized of just being like, oh, that's a weird hardcore band, right?
Yeah. I when I listen to it, I'm like, I even hear some, like, not that it's a one-to-one comparison, but like the weirdness of bands like Rorschach and Starkweather, who are also just doing stuff in 1990 as well. Like, they are same time, Railway Time. There's weirdness in those bands that I see the similar weirdness that Supertouch plays with at times.
But I think what is more unusual about this record is how much it kind of just sounds like a melodic rock record. Yeah. But rhythmically it's still hardcore.
Yeah. I kept reading that online where people were like, I hear a lot of alternative rock in this sound. Especially when you throw in all the acoustic guitars that are all over this record. There's so much acoustic guitar on here, which is, we are already past the time point, right? Where like the acoustic intro, well, I guess it becomes kind of like rote by the mid 90s. That's when it's like, all right, now everybody's doing it. The acoustic guitar intro to a full hardcore song. But they don't do it that way. They actually integrate the acoustic guitar.
The acoustic guitars on here are more like Husker Du than like a Metallica song intro.
Yeah.
Which is, I think, what the acoustic guitar intro of a hardcore record kind of comes from. I enjoy the record. I think halfway through the record, I was like, this isn't actually great. But then on the back half of it, for some reason, I felt like reinvigorated by it. And I was just like, actually, I kind of do like this. So it's a very back and forth, up and down kind of. And I think where I guess ultimately like where I came away enjoying it is I kind of realized it's like an artier Rollins band.
I was going to ask you,
is sound this like Henry Rollins?
Well, I mean, that's a piece of it. Yeah, I do think he's got a Henry voice. sonically, to me, he sounds closer to what Sean Linwood of Admiral and later Navio Forge sounds like. He's got more that kind of like that attitude going than so much of Henry's like barking version of it, but more what Henry would do with the Rollins band vocally. But yeah, it's very like that raspy, holding out the notes kind of thing. Rorschach does a little of that too. I also got a little like 7 Years War. That's a deep cut.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be a
7 Years War. 7 Year War.
Yeah.
Oh shit. Were they?
They were one and done, right? Like they just had one album, maybe a 7-inch, and that's it or something. I don't even know where they're from, what label put that out. I always liked that record. I think it's like mid-90s.
I can't even find that record anymore.
It's like mid-90s too, right? Like it's like 95 or something like that. Let's see if I can find it real quick. I've pulled it up in the past.
96.
Vermont band.
Yeah.
On Struggle Records and Moo Cow. So
Ranks of the Common People.
Yep.
Man, I haven't thought about that record in forever.
It fucking rocks. I listened to it like last year, and I was like, this is still good. I bet there's nothing about that band out there. They would not be worth doing an episode on, because I bet you couldn't find shit about them. Unless one of them was in like another bigger band. But I feel like that's a band who's probably trying to do Supertouch.
Yeah.
And Rollins band at the same time. But anyway, we're not doing 7 Years War. Maybe one day, but not today. None of them did anything else notable. Okay. Todd Henning, the drummer, it looks like.
Yeah.
He was in Heckle and Nations of Fire, and he was in Death by Stereo. So he's the one who did something, but oftentimes the drummer's the one who does something because they're a drummer. And people need drummers. Yeah.
Drummers are like in 3 bands at a time.
I think drummers probably have more credits than most other members of bands. Just because, there's not enough drummers to go around.
Well, a drummer is the one guy you're willing to pay.
It's true. They are the session, like, we paid someone to play on drums on our record because we didn't have a drummer.
You don't even really have to be that good of a drummer to be a session drummer. You're just willing to do it.
Yeah. But my question was going to be, is this a My War Side B band? You know?
Yeah.
They don't cite Black Flag as influences, though.
That's like the funny thing.
At all. I don't think... I mean, they've mentioned them occasionally, but they're like... They know who Black Flag is, and they know the records. But they don't cite them as what they were trying to do.
Yeah. Do you feel like the My War Side B hardcore guys are the same guys that we're talking about this Supertouch record?
You know, it has a similar... It's talked about similarly. The same kind of guy who's like way into My War Side B talks about that record the same way the Supertouch record is talked about. I don't know if they're the same guy, though.
Are those guys just Quicksand fans, though?
He could be, yeah. Yeah. I mean, because, that My War Side B is also super influential on, like, sludge and Melvins and that kind of stuff, but...
Yeah.
I feel like there's something there, though. I don't think they even realize it. Maybe they're just pulling from someone else who was influenced by that, but it's not nothing. I feel like it's in there, in the DNA.
Yeah. So... This is an interesting record because I think I would describe this record as a record that is better for what it could be than it actually is. It's kind of like you listen to this record and imagine all of the things that you wish that they were doing, that they could get there very easily from where they are. But it's not quite there. It's just like it's the potential energy of this record is so appealing that it makes listening to the record better than it actually is.
Yeah, I kind of think that this is a record that I like better in theory than I actually do listening to it. This is a record that when I listened to it, all those years ago when I did that piece, I was like, I thought it was fine, but I didn't think it was even like strong enough of a record that I was like I didn't love it. Revisiting it, listening back to it, I don't love this record. I think it's too slow. I think the songs are too slow for the most part. I don't love the production. That may be just more of a time and place situation. I don't know if that's... I don't hate it either. It's not like a really horrible, unlistenable production. It's just like, it's got a lot of air in it. Like, you can hear a lot of the room in it.
Yeah, the drums are pretty roomy. The guitars are a little bit flat and maybe a little too low in the mix. The vocals don't really sit in the mix very well. Nothing is really gluing together.
Yeah. I don't know if it's just...
The dynamics are just not smoothed out.
It's not smooth. And again, like I said, it's kind of plotting. Like, it's kind of a plotting album, which I wondered, I was like, is this a case of, like, it doesn't translate live to studio as well? But then I went and found a live set of them from, like, 1995, and it's the same speed. Like, this is how fast they play live, which I'm like, why were people so into them? The kind of people who were so into them shouldn't be into them is kind of how I felt about it. But when I read people, the way people talk about this, they're like, this record, the first time I heard it, blew my mind and was so transformative and like it changed how I listen to hardcore music. And I wonder if it's just a case of, because you were only listening to New York hardcore, is that what it was? You were only listening to fast-paced New York hardcore, and this is the first time you heard something slow? It's kind of like, were you not listening to Black Flag? Because they were doing the slower stuff like 5 years earlier.
They slowed down, and I could hear all the notes they were playing, man.
So I think this is a record that I'm like, one, I don't love listening to it. I think it's too slow, which is a complaint I have for a lot of records. Stylistically, it's interesting, but I don't love it. But all at the same time, I like what it represents. I like that it sounds like this and comes from that New York hardcore scene. I like that it was boundary pushing. I like that it was super influential. It's like, I like this record more in theory than I do... its influence, its place in time, its geographical association. I love all of that. I don't love the songs. I don't love listening to the record. It's kind of a weird feeling to be like, highly respect this album. Don't think I would care if I never heard it again. Yeah.
I wish that I wish that it was actually musically weirder than it is. I think that's where I see the potential for it to go, especially when you like lay out the, how it came together and what influences they were pulling from, and where I hear, that sort of artiness, if they could have leaned more into that. And but there's other bands that, Shudder to Think is doing art rock with muscular riffs the same year,
Chicago has already been doing it for several years.
Yeah.
LA had already been doing it for a long time. Like, they got Artie in like 83.
Mission of Burma has come and gone a long time ago,
Boston, yeah.
It's funny because I'm not particularly a fan of Quicksand, but I do think they actually got this sound right.
Yeah, I know what you mean. There's more interesting riffs, I feel like, on the Quicksand record. I think the vocals are better. I think Walter's a better singer than Mark is. Even though they're both kind of one note. Well, I will say this. Most of the record, Mark is doing a Henry Rollins rasp. Except when he sometimes pulls out his HR clean sing. At the end of certain lines of some of the songs, he'll just randomly just start doing a Shudder to Think. It's just like, not as falsetto-y, but like vibrato. It's like, you're trying something, but you're nervous about it. So you don't do full lines. You're just like, I'm going to put it at the end.
Yeah. I do think there's a lot of holding back on this record that hurts it. It's just not quite committing to the idea, not quite going as far out there. Because I look at this album cover, it looks so cool.
Yeah. Great album cover. We can talk about the album cover. It is a black cover, all black. It's got the names. Color choices were so good too. The blue in the album, it's the band name is in blue and the album title's in white. Block letters, blue name. The photo is like in a box, and it's like, I guess the band members standing in like dusk, or like, the sun is about to go down entirely, and you can barely make the outline of them. But it's a good looking album cover. I wonder how much of that is part of the appeal too. Like, it gives it an aura that
it does. It looks like, it looks like an ECM jazz record.
In some ways it even looks not too dissimilar from like the Buzzcock Singles Going Steady cover, where it's like the photo of the band's in a box, like it's an all black background, the band name. The photo was taken by someone named Teresa Kelleher, who has had photos published in artwork for bands such as Killing Time, Cold Water Flat, and Swizz. Some of her photos are in the Swizz discography that just came out last year. So like some of her pictures are in there.
Or it looks like it almost looks like a Pat Metheny. Yeah, like I said, an ECM jazz, or even like a Sade record, or like
yeah, Sade. Oh, that's a good one. But even like really like a smaller scale version of the Circle Jerks group sex, where it's like the black background instead of like the image being like centered and like a square, it's like a cut in half, and it's like half the cover space. It's a good cover. It's a really good album cover. The back cover is black and white photo of a gas pump in the middle of nowhere by Andy Guida. He took the picture. And then the inside, there's like a bunch of collage band photos just taken by Eric Fennell and the band. I did find a random article, though, it was a blog post. It was somebody who worked for Revelation Records who just like shared stuff he found on his blog just by going through like the archives, and he found the mock-up for this album sleeve, and apparently originally it was meant to be a gatefold, and I don't know that Revelation had done a lot of gatefolds yet at that point, but it was it was just gonna be the collage photo inside, so it's like, I don't know, that's probably why they ultimately were like, do we need to spend the extra money on a gatefold sleeve for just band photos that we could put inside the inner sleeve, But it was just funny because they were like, the idea of this being a gatefold would have even made it probably would have helped make it even more legendary for the artwork for what it was. But I thought that was interesting to see. Lyrically, I read all the lyrics. It's very much like talking about emotions and feelings and interpersonal relationships. It was funnily, there's songs about other people too, but there's not a lot of hardcore platitudes on this album. Mark says he just writes about himself. He's like, I don't want to write about big topics because I don't want to be preaching at people. And that seemed to be like his thing. I think he was so turned off by Youth Crew that he was like, I'm not doing messages. I'm not doing that kind of thing at all. I'm just going to sing about things that impact me personally. There is one weird thing about it, though, is there's a full-on environmental message song on this record, though. The song is called The Painted Sky. And it has a line in it, or, a verse in it that goes, it gets some people sick while the other ones just get rich. And still the children play in this hot, humid winter day. And at night when the sun goes down, they still have light in this New Jersey town. The sky's fluorescent orange and blue. A pregnant mother says, what should I do? And it's like, well, you don't like to talk about big topics and big subjects, but you have an environmental song on your record. So I thought that was kind of interesting. But otherwise, like, the rest of the record is pretty much like, yeah, it's about somebody's thoughts, and feelings. Very inner turmoil, looking back, reflecting internally. There are always some songs on the records where I'm just like, it's just about a shitty roommate. Anything it takes feels like one of those songs where it's just like, you're young enough and you're just talking about like, oh, you suck. You're just terrible to be around and nobody likes you and you mooch off people. And it always just feels like you're just talking about a guy that sucks. I thought Vendor could be an anti-religious song. I don't know if it is, though. It's just vague enough. It's about choosing to live your life a different way than what someone else wants you to do. That, I wonder if it comes from John Viviano, though, because apparently his dad was super duper strict and like hated rock music and like took away records from him because it was like, it's ruining your schoolwork. And he was like, it was. I wouldn't stop thinking about rock music as a kid. So it could be kind of him just kind of tackling that concept, because Mark writes the lyrics, so he could be writing it on the behalf of John, maybe, or just like the idea of a song. Which it explains too why the guitar work. I think the guitar work is actually really good here. There are some really interesting guitar leads on this album. They're just like, that is weird. Why is that is not a hardcore guitar lead, but it's kind of cool that it's here. And it's because he wasn't allowed to listen to rock music as a kid, so he just had an acoustic guitar that he learned how to do everything to. Like, he just learned everything he possibly could on the acoustic guitar, which is probably why the acoustic guitar features so prominently in the record, and why you get such weird riffs and like leads and solos on this record, because it's like, that's not how someone who learned how to play a guitar with power chords would write. So it's like, oh, you actually learned real picking and stuff like that. So I thought that was kind of interesting. Oh, the bass playing too is also, apparently he was like a phenomenal bass player. The early stuff is all finger picked, which is rare in hardcore. There's not that much finger pick hardcore, but he transitioned to playing with a pick because it made it sounds harder in hardcore. I think you should have a pick. I think it gives it a crunch. It makes it more aggressive sounding than finger playing in hardcore. You can do more.
It gives you more control. You can dig in with your fingers, but you're doing a lot more like almost slapping. You really kind of have to strike down with your finger on the string, and you're getting a lot more to get that click and bite when you're playing fingerstyle to get an aggressive sound. And then you just have you need like a compressor. You have such wild dynamics, and like it's so much easier to just play hardcore and dig in and kind of get that consistency and that grind with a pick. That, yeah, I prefer it.
Yeah,
for sure. I just prefer playing the bass with a pick too.
Is it just because we started with guitars?
It's just easier. It's just easier, and I can even do it. Like, I can play lightly with a pick.
Yeah, you can.
But, yeah. The playing is good on this record. It all just doesn't quite come together. And it's almost like, I think what is disappointing about this record is that it is not, I don't know, it's not categorical. It's not representative. Even though, I mean, I get what you were saying of it being like a capital P post-hardcore record, but like, it almost hints at too many different things that it's not. Because there's aspects of this, like, you know, going off of the quicksand thing, there's even elements of this that I think are not far off from like Failure or Hum. And this isn't really like, it's not really a spaceship hardcore record, you know? But it hints at that. Like, especially when you look at the album cover and the title, and like, you see this record and you think, oh, okay, this is probably, you know, a direct influence on like Title Fight. But like, it kind of doesn't really sound like it.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
It's a distant predecessor to it.
Right. Yeah, I think it's a case of they're just some unique guys. And they just were like, we like DC stuff. We like stuff that's not in our immediate backyard, you know?
Yeah. They're playing in one scene and those kinds of bands and are informed by New York hardcore, but they're aspiring to be something else.
Which I think is part of what makes them special, too. Because if this was just another regular-ass Revelation Records record, from this time period, Revelation would eventually like expand more. I mean, Shelter the same year. It's like Shelter's a weird hardcore band too, so that's notable. I think it's a case of like it's timing. I think this is you had to be there record. I think the weight and the impact, we can like look back on history and see what this record represents and like what went into it, what led to it. But as far as like pure enjoyability, this might need to be like, oh, we've heard what this genre does for the next 25 years already by the time you and I get to this record. So it does feel kind of like, is that all it is? You know? Because it's talked about in this way.
Yeah, it's talked about that way. And it has that legacy and that impact. It's almost like a record that if they had finished this record but not released it, or even if they had, finished this record and put it out and kept going as a band, the next thing they do would be the one.
I think you're right. I do think you're right.
I think, they could have finished this record and been like, this didn't actually come together, but maybe actually it should go here, and then redid the record. I think they could have improved it, I think that it just could have had a second pass through in like the writing and editing process, and then like recorded maybe better.
Yeah.
And you would have something that is actually that categorical, like exemplary record.
Yeah. There's a lot kind of like holding this band back as far as it took them forever to find a bassist. Like I said, they had several bassists throughout the years before they finally landed on him. And when he got there, they were like, "You're perfect we love you. This is perfect. This is great." But it took them forever to find a bassist. And then like it took them forever to get that first 7-inch out. When they recorded this record, they claimed at the time, they were like, we couldn't figure out how to make what we were doing live translate to the studio. Now, after hearing what they did live and seeing what they did sounded like live, I do think they got better at it. They got closer than I think they realized. Their problem may be more with the production than necessarily the actual songwriting, because they'd be playing them live and they liked how they sounded live, but they didn't like how they came out in the studio. So to me, that means they didn't layer enough. To me, that means the producer was like either not strong enough, or they didn't have enough money to spend the time in the studio to like do a lot more layering of guitars, because the guitars aren't that layered. There's some layering, but not. It's where you kind of run into that like samey tone that the record kind of has too. Yeah, it's one of those ones where it's like they didn't have that much money. They saved all their money to go do a big US tour. They then had to recoup all the money that they lost from that tour. And that's where like the 7-inch happened. And then I don't know. It was like a weird, like nothing ever was smooth for them. And I do wonder if that second LP, what it would have sounded like. But yeah, we could talk about the aftermath, because there's a little bit to that story too as well. So this is essentially the last major thing they put out. They wind up losing Guida and Graziano, and then they bring in Chris Vitale of Orange 9mm and Rich Edsel. And then the band would eventually call it quits in 1996, though they had begun working on a second album before breaking up. But everyone had different ideas of where they wanted to take the band, and they couldn't finish it. So basically they're just like, fine. They recorded some stuff. I think there maybe were demos, but those demos are lost. There's one song that made it out. I think it's called it was on some compilation called Antimatter. And I think that's like the only thing that survived from that writing period that they worked on. But even then, like they were trying to write a record in like 95. And it's like, why did you wait 5 years to write a record? Your follow-up record. That's weird too. I know they toured a bunch. They toured the US, they toured the UK. They toured UK in 92, and one interview I was reading was like, did you think you got over there too late? And it's like, even by 92 that they were like saying like, Supertouch is wasting their potential. Again, it's member change up again, so I have a feeling that that's what stalled them on getting a record done. But again, like I said, they wouldn't finish it. So Joe Graziano and Andy Guida would later go on to play in the band Real with Bill Dolan of the previously mentioned American Standard, as well as Miles Reef of Altercation. Guida and John Biviano would also play in the band Running Like Thieves. Guida would also play in My Rifle, Absolution, While We Wait, The Press, One-Sided War, and The Mistaken. A lot of bands. And then Biviano would go into play in the band World Indifference, Windfall, Pembroke, and Ancient Domains. Mark Ryan would also go on to play in the band Foreign Islands. So the band does reunite in 2010, but only John Biviano and Mark Ryan would actually take part in this band. One of the reasons they do initially play with Joe, but Joe passes away in 2010. They believe suicide. So they said that Joe had played like a couple shows with them, was super excited to get to work with the band. Like he was really excited for what they were going to do, and then took his own life. They do eventually go on to release the Lost My Way EP in 2010 on Reaper Records. There's a live record called Live in on WNYU 1988, released in 2011 on Horror Hotel Productions. And they released the Flying High, which was, I think, a song written in 95. I don't know if it was recorded in 95, as a flexi on Triple B in 2017. And the band had actually planned to record a second album. And it has also now been 10 years since they said they were going to do an album. And there's been some more kind of shakeups since then. I found an interview with Bibiano in 2023 where he said Mark Ryan has left Supertouch as the lead singer in 2022. So they reunite in 2010. They do sporadic reunions. They're never like a super touring band, but they're like a festival band. And he said that Mark left the name Supertouch and all the music to John to do with what he wants. And the trade-off is Mark gets to keep what they recorded in 2012 for him to do with as he pleases. Apparently in 2012, they wrote and recorded 8 tracks. And Mark is going to use it for a future project. What that is, I don't know. But it was an amicable split. I suspect it meant they couldn't agree on what they were doing. And that's why they recorded this stuff in 2012. They didn't put it out. And then he leaves the band 10 years later. To me, that says Mark wants to do something with this. John doesn't want to do something with this. We're going to go ahead and just like part ways here. And so now the lead singer of Supertouch, because it's still a band, is Matt Warnke of Bold. He is now the lead singer of Supertouch. And John's the only actual former Supertouch member. I think there's two more guys playing in the band that weren't in there. I think Rich Edsel played at some of the reunion version of the band, but they've got more different people playing in the band too. And they apparently are also working on new songs. So who knows what Mark is going to do with those songs? I think Supertouch is now going by the name Supertouch NYC. I think they wanted to differentiate that, like, this is not, don't come to see Supertouch expecting Mark Ryan. You're going to come to Supertouch and see the guy from Bold singing. So, I don't know how I feel about that. I don't know is that a downgrade? I don't know. Bold's like a 7-inch only band, I think. So I don't know if that's an upgrade or not, but yeah, that is the Supertouch story, I suppose. Let's give it a rating, get out of here. We went nearly 2 hours on this record, which I did not think we would do. So that's, especially when we have a crunch time today. But yeah, final thoughts on it. What, did we win?
Broke even?
Yeah, I would say that. I enjoyed researching it. I enjoyed learning about this record. I didn't love listening to the album. So yeah, I would say, yeah, breaking even's pretty good. Yeah. What would you rate it?
Probably like right down the middle. Well, maybe slightly more. 3.
You going 3?
3 out of 5.
I'm gonna give it 3.25. I think that's where I'm at. I think I appreciate the attempt gives it that extra quarter star to me.
Yeah.
Like what they were trying to do is commendable, and I think it deserves some extra credit, you know, think about it that way. But yeah, as a final product, I'm just like, it's fine. All right. Well, I think that will do it. So we appreciate each and every one of you for listening, and kind of surprised what the reaction to this episode will be. I wonder if people will be like, these two are way off base. This record's phenomenal.
Yeah, there's potential for some super fans.
Yeah. But even people within our circle who are already like fans of this record, I could see some guys being like, oh yeah, I love that record. You guys don't love that? That's weird. But I don't know. You had to be there, man. All right. That'll do it. So appreciate you. You can follow us everywhere on social media at punklautopod, punklautopod@gmail.com, and our voicemail line 202-688-PUNK. Call it, leave us a message, and we will play it on the show. Call it and tell us how wrong we are about Supertouch. I really do want to hear what people love about it. I am always interested in hearing what people's thoughts on the records are. So, even if they differ from ours wildly. Where are we following you, Dylan?
You can find me at Husker Dylan or Major Awards Band. And you can catch us in LA at Oblivion on May 31st in some form or another. We're committing to playing the show. I am not 100% sure what it's going to look like yet.
Who will be there? It may be solo acoustic major award, or maybe a 2-piece, 3-piece. Who knows?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, and we'll be plugging that until it probably happens. So, all right, that'll do it. Thank you so much. We appreciate each and every one of you, and we will talk to you next time.
To order Punk, call the number on your screen. Rush delivery is available. Remember, this special offer is not sold in stores.